Dr. Bryson here with another video for the criminal profiling class, and this is for the summer of 2022. In this unit, we're talking about crime signature, modus operandi, and motive. So let's talk about this motivation facilitation model of sexual offending and murder. Now, this is used a lot in treatment with sex offenders. That is treatment that is specifically aimed at the sexual offending itself. So curtailing the sexual offending. And this is usually with sexual offenders who are in prison or have been in prison and are on parole. It is sometimes used with sex offenders who have not been in prison but are on probation. But this model helps us explain the motivation and the facilitation. And this does get to signature and motive of operation, or modus operandi is the term that you will see used most of the time. So let's look at this graphic on the screen. You'll notice that to the right of the screen, it says the offense. Right, so the offense is the murder or the sexual assault or whatever the offense may be, because it can apply to other types of crimes as well. Now, sex offenders will say, you know, that's not me, I was drunk. But what they're getting at is what we call the state facilitators. That's at the bottom of this graphic. You'll notice there are two types of facilitators, trait and state. Remember a couple of weeks, or rather units ago, we talked about emotions as traits or states. Well, there are other things that can be either a trait or a state. Psychopathy is a trait. It's never going to be a state, because in order for someone to be considered a psychopath, it has to be an enduring pattern. That's the definition of a trait. Personality disorders, those are enduring patterns. That means those will always be traits. That would include antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. A person may have an angry personality. That's going to be a trait. Or they might just be angry in the moment. That's a state. So some of the state facilitators, meaning this is a state that they are in at the time that they committed their offense, would be that person is intoxicated or high. An opportunity presents itself. In other words, they've already got the motivation, and they're not looking for an opportunity, but all of a sudden an opportunity presents itself. So they take advantage of that opportunity. There are many sex offenders that are opportunistic. And murderers as well, although murderers tend to go out looking. Not all sex offenders tend to go out looking. Okay, so now those are facilitators, meaning these are things that help them facilitate the decision to commit the offense. But they are not the motive for committing the offense. Now, there are a lot of folks that will say that power and control is what sexual offending and murder are about. Well, it might be partially about that, but not totally. It wouldn't be a sexual offense if there wasn't some sexual attraction to the deviant act. Okay, if it's a sexual offense, sexual motivation will always be part, likely not all, but part of the motivation. Power and control may be part of it, but there are some sex offenders that it's not so much about power and control as it is that they have the trait of being immature, and their motivation is to find someone to connect to that they feel comfortable with, kind of the opposite of power and control. But this person might have sexual attraction to sadistic acts, either sexual or non-sexual. For instance, the Nazis that ran the concentration camps, that engaged in all those sadistic behaviors. They didn't do it because of a sexual desire. They did it for other types of pleasure. Serial killers who are sexually sadistic killers, they gain sexual attraction by the pain that they're causing the victim. So some of the sadistic behaviors may not look sexual, but they're engaging in those behaviors because of the sexual desire. So it's important to understand that if you are doing an investigation of a murder or a serial sexual offending, and you don't know who the perpetrator is, then you can look for some of these things. You'll know a little bit about them. Now, knowing that someone is a sexual sadist doesn't necessarily tell us who they are, because sexual sadists who don't mind people knowing that they have that, they tend to go to these consenting sadomasochism clubs and are likely not to be serial sex offenders or killers. So knowing that they are a sadistic offender might help you set a trap for them, but it doesn't really identify who they might be. So if you'll notice, I just added another part: set a trap for them. In other words, if you know some things psychologically about your perpetrator, you might be able to lure them into a situation, bait them, and be able to catch them that way. Now, this can be a very dangerous prospect. There have been times where serial killers were being sought, and female police officers would dress up like hookers and take to the street because hookers were the victim type of the unknown serial killer. That can be very, very dangerous. So that's something that only the agency doing the investigation can decide whether or not they're going to do it. They are very scary tactics in my book. So if a female officer were to ask my opinion, I would try my best to get her to understand the risk, the very deep risk involved in such a tactic. All right, so we need to understand this idea that some things motivate, but then there are facilitators. If the facilitators are present, but the motive is not there, or the motivation is not there, then an offense is likely not going to occur. I want you to hear that. If the motivation is not there, but the traits are there, there is likely not going to be an offense. Now, keep in mind, I didn't say it would be certain that there wouldn't be an offense. I'm saying it is likely. And motivation is something that we can control. So again, these facilitators, they facilitate the decision to act. The motivation is the desire to do it. But there might be state facilitators or even trait facilitators, but then there might be other traits that and other states that prevent an offense from happening. So if it's a state facilitator and I'm intoxicated, I might have a sober friend there that prevents me from doing something, right? Or maybe there's a part of me that is psychopathic, but I also am a religious person and believe that God will send me to hell if I do this. So even though I don't care about other people, I'm psychopathic, I still may not commit the offense because my fear of going to hell is too high. So very important to understand that facilitators simply help facilitate the decision to offend, where motivation is what provides the impetus to want to offend. So I'm going to stop the screen share here for just a second and remind you that this is a very important concept. So please make sure that you understand it. I've shared the photograph or the image, the JPEG of this graphic, so you have that in bright space. I would urge you to save it to your computer and have it available to you. It will be very helpful in investigations. It will be helpful in prosecution. Sometimes the defense might try to blame states rather than motives. And knowing this can help you frame cross-examination questions for witnesses. But it can also help with treatment, especially when I've got someone who's trying to minimize their offense and say, well, that's not me. Well, you had the motive. You had the motive. We will see you next video.